At every level, the planet of Nakare-1011c has seen many Earthling species evolve and adapt to a new environment light years away from Earth. In just 5 million years, many animals have adapted into a variety of strange and unique forms, and this series will be dedicated to providing a window to this world of unguided evolution and natural history. Welcome to the abandoned world of Parias. Last episode, we examined the brisk lands of southern Lucindo, a land racked with seasonal extremes and occasional snowfall on an otherwise heating planet, as well as the life forms that have adapted to thrive in this region. In this episode, however, we travel northward towards an ancient, eroding mountain range. The Lucindan high plateaus are all that remains of our gargantuan mountain range that existed during the early ages of pre-human Parian history, eroding to water and the great sands of unyielding time. To the north of these highlands is the great woodlands of central Lucindo, a dense forest dominated by large trees and diverse wildlife. To the west, the waterlogged and swampy wetlands of southwest Lucindo touch the foothills. And in the south, the animals of South Lucindo depicted in the previous episode reside in this location. Being the last vestiges of a more ancient land formation, this elevated highland juts out hundreds of meters around the foothills that surround it. This great and tall plateau of Lucindo are flat compared to the other highlands and mountains on the rest of the planet, but the many sheer cliffs of hard bedrock make conditions for plant growth difficult, and animal colonization even more so. Despite the challenges behind settling in such a difficult, high, dry land, life found a way to make do with what they were given. The high Lucindan plateaus are surrounded by foothills, with climatic conditions not dissimilar to the boreal forests from the south. Because of this, animals that have adapted to the more harsh conditions may have advantage over other species trying to do the same. The humble quilled lemming has some members of its species that persist in the foothills of the highlands. Herds of great crowned stag and spotted pronghorn may find themselves this far north in the winter to escape the harsh cold, feeding on the bounty of grasses and mosses in the foothills of the Lucindan high plateaus. Another herbivore, the great zemu, often fly to these regions to feed on the grasses that thrive, doing better here than they do in the thicker woodlands that they spend their summers in. However, these herbivores bring the predators of their homelands to follow them in the seasonal variation, such as the elder owls and snow jackals. These predators do well here in the winters, using the lengthened nighttime for tactically ambushing prey. This menagerie of animals depicted in more detail in last episode do well here, but are not the only animals who have made a niche for themselves in the foothills of the plateaus. One species that is quite successful in the foothills are the small yet hardy frost toads, descendants of the American toads that can be found here and in many other places across central and southern Lucindo. Frost toads have become a very successful group of amphibians, and have become this way due to their adaptations that give them an advantage over other frogs and toads in surviving in these new, turbulent lands. Their primary weapon for defense is their poison, having a toxin that makes them extremely unpalatable. When a frost toad reaches maturity, next to nothing wants to actually eat them. However, when they are young, they can be vulnerable to predation, as they lack the quantity of poison that gives the adults their punch. The other adaptation they have acquired for surviving in the temperature climates of Lucindo is their ability to go into a torpor through the harsh of winter, only waking back up when the temperature warms up and food becomes more abundant. These adaptations have led them to being massively successful, but has come with some unique and unexpected perks. Some populations of these frogs are known for hibernating in mammal burrows, taking advantage of another's hard work. Whilst for some frost toads they give nothing back to the host, others will clean their fluffy roommate, ridding them of external parasites as a final snack before entering hibernation. The mole crayfish is a bizarre arthropod, being found nowhere else on Parias. Migrating from waterways in the west, these crayfish descendants have made some novel changes to become less bound to the water, becoming a more terrestrial organism. The mole crayfish is known for digging complicated tunnel systems many times longer than their own body lengths. This provides protection from the outside world, but moisture from deep within the tunnel system ensures the nest is moist and suitable for the organism to survive. They feed on decaying material, roots, and any small invertebrates unfortunate enough to cross their paths. Their nests can often come into contact through explorative tunnels, but confrontations between members of the same species is rare. They mate when a heavy storm comes around, and the males rush above the surface, finding female tunnel systems to mate with the resident. This can be risky business for the male, but few predators go hunting in such a storm. All of these animals have partial control over these lands, but indeed share them with the flora, fauna, and fungi of the highlands up above. The plant life here has evolved a unique array of survival strategies to surviving the poor soil conditions and drier climate of the region. The Lucindan common moss, the most basal of plants in the region, sprawls in the foothills wherever moisture is found, but does not do well in the high plateaus, given the drier conditions up in the highlands. A small and rather irritating plant that can be found all over the plateaus and foothills alike is the amusingly named crabbygrass, a crabgrass descendant that has evolved a rather prickly means of reproduction. Their small size and smaller requirements for water make them pre-adapted for a lifestyle here, but have one more feature that makes them more irritating. They have evolved to produce less seeds per tilling, but the seeds are covered in a thick outer shell that resembles a hooked spike. If an animal comes into contact with its seed pod, they will get the seeds stuck to their bodies and will painfully walk elsewhere to disperse it. Another small plant has adapted for seed dispersal by slightly less barbaric means. The fireberry is a capsicum descendant that has retained the intense heat bred into them by the long-gone human gardeners of yore. The plant as a whole is a small, thin-leafed bush that is often avoided by mammals, but a great food source for frugivorous birds. Birds lack the taste receptors that detect heat, something that many mammals do. Because of this, the fireberry can ensure that it is only dispersed through birds and spread further than a mammal can naturally disperse seeds through their digestive tract. Another species that grows relatively tall is the Highland grass, growing almost exclusively in the canyons of rivers and ephemeral water bodies in the region. Growing over 2 meters tall, these thickets and stands of tall grass provide great protection for small mammals and insects. They reproduce by wind dispersal, as winds are common on such tall flatlands with no barriers in the way. Less exclusive than the fireberry, the cliff pawpaw is a short, stout tree that thrives in the highlands and has more recently started to spread northward. The banana-shaped fruit are filled to the brim with grapeshot-like seeds and is a staple food item for many animals in the region. The fruits are often sought after by small mammals, often burying seeds and occasionally forgetting where they buried them. Given the decreased dedication to growing tall and the increased evolutionary pressure to produce more fruits, they have become vastly successful and have settled in new environments northwards of the highlands. On the other end of the scale, the largest and most dominant tree species in the area is not a flowering angiosperm, but a pinophyte. The steppe spruce is a large pine tree descendant that grows slowly over the vast highlands, often found in stands of trees by small creeks and rivers. Their spindly, needle-like leaves and sharp pines make them unpalatable for most animals, leaving them alone to grow tall. The many bird species that call these lands home will often nest and rest in these trees, as the steppe spruce are a great vantage point over the flat, dry lands of the plateaus. However, not every tree has adapted to grow tall in these lands. A strange, tough, and shrubbish-looking tree can be found in plentiful amounts across the highest points of the plateaus, and strangely enough in other mountain lands. The creeping pine is a rather strange bristlecone pine descendant that does well in highlands such as the Lucindan plateaus. A couple of meters tall when fully grown, and capable for living for thousands of years, their tangled masses of stems and branches are the ideal hiding and feeding location for migratory birds who nest in them. Some of these birds will eat the cones offered by the creeping pine and disperse them elsewhere. This has allowed these plants to be dispersed hundreds of kilometers away from their homeland, becoming native in the central Lucindan Mountains and even Bell Creek Western Peaks. The most specialized plant that persists in the flatlands and foothills alike is the small flowering bush of the fall rose. Fall rose plants spread wide and not tall, with spiky branches that eventually become too heavy and dry out as they are replaced by younger branches. These old branches become an extra layer of protection from herbivores, as the ground around the plant becomes too spiky for any large animal to consider this plant worth the risk. These plants have long roots that make searching for water easy. However, what makes this genera of rose descendant unique is their fat flower structures, so large in comparison to the branch that it resides on that it causes the branch to sink to the ground, despite the lower gravity of Parias. Why do these plants have such thick flowers, and what purpose do they serve? The answers lie in a small bat descendant that roots in them. The fall rose provides housing for rosy Cupid's bats to roost in during the day, and the Cupid's bat eats any insects that infest the plant and exclusively pollinate this species alone. The Cupid's bat has evolved this unique lifestyle through eating the rose's original pollinators, getting pollen on them often. As these bats ate the insects, they accidentally completed pollination in the process. Bats that hung around these roses got the evolutionary advantage over bats in the region, having a safe space to reside in during the day. Eventually, an evolutionary pressure selected for rose bushes and bats that have become more and more dependent on each other, to the point where the bright red-furred bats stick out like a sore thumb during the day without their fall rose hosts, and the fall rose is exclusively pollinated by the Cupid's bat. The Cupid's bat has evolved red fur, a long tongue for seeking nectar and insects, and more intelligence. These bats form monogamous pairs and mate for life, hunting together each night and roosting in the same bush during the day. These plants have all adapted well to the region, further halting the erosion of the plateaus and maintaining a new ecosystem. All of these diverse species of plants fill the bottom of the food chain, providing a base for the heterotrophic organisms to feast. Another key chain in the ecosystem of the Lucindan High Plateaus is the fungal life. The common shine shroom and snakeskin fungus, featured in the previous episode, have adapted to the harsh conditions, doing well in the damp crevices carved into the ancient rock. Their adaptability and lack of competition make them well suited for taking on the advantages of becoming established in new locations across the southern half of Lucindo. However, they aren't the only fungi to represent their kingdom in the Highlands. One species has adapted to the harsh conditions of the high steppe by becoming parasitic, latching onto other organisms for their own self-gain. The Lucindan siphoner is a shiitake descendant that has adapted a purely parasitic lifestyle, growing out from the host plant and sucking away nutrients out of them in the process. The vast majority of spores and young mycelium die off in the process of an attempted host infection. But chances are one spore will parasitize successfully and keep the generations going. Being non-toxic, they are often eaten or touched by herbivores coming from plant to plant, helping in the spread of the next generation of parasites. Another fungus capitalizes off of a different source instead of the nutrients of living plants. The morbid mushroom is a common sight to see in the region, especially around dead bodies of animals or plants, The young members of this species have long strands of mycelium that make them good symbionts for local plants. But these organisms lie in wait until they detect the chemicals of decay. When the morbid mushroom detects a dead body, they will grow underground towards it and produce fruiting bodies, or mushrooms, to complete their life cycle. They use nutrients from the decaying plant or animal material to produce more fruiting bodies. The spores of these fungi are covered in a sticky substance that can easily stick to a passing animal, and whilst the fruiting body has a sticky scent, it is perfectly edible. In fact, many scavengers will eat the smelly mushrooms, getting sticky black spores all over their faces in the process. When the animal wipes the spores off in a new location, many of the spores will have a good chance to start the next generation and lie in wait once more. These fungi form a unique role in the ecosystem, being key in plant growth and clearing away dead organisms. They, however, are not the only heterotrophic creatures that call these lands home. The world of arthropods have a unique barrage of organisms that have adapted well to the region, as the many opportunities for niches are there for the small insects to claim for themselves. One of these arthropods is the big-headed grass louse. The big-headed grass louse thrives in the highlands and other regions of the western continent of Lucindo, and have carved a niche for themselves as a small, adaptive, and omnivorous insect. Their larger heads and stronger mandibles allow them to eat more resources than their ancestors, and their varied diets making them able to exploit more environments and reproduce more frequently. Being small and reproducing rapidly, sheer numbers alone allow these small arthropods to thrive. However, many grass louse struggle in places where high levels of competition are, especially from a beetle descendant that may be bound to take their place. The snipper beetle is an arthropod descended from the golden stag beetle that has adapted a more herbivorous style of living. With a pair of cutting, scissor-like pincers, they eat plant material exclusively when they reach adulthood, preferring grasses as their favorite snack. Their more aerodynamic bodies and wings make them slightly better at flying than their ancestors, which has allowed them to spread across the continent wherever food is plentiful. The main strategy for survival against large predators, if their heavy armor does not work, is reproducing in high numbers, as the autumns of this continent are filled with swarms of these beetle descendants, which will reproduce as much as they can and leave hundreds of eggs and larvae across the land before they die. The necessary evil is a biting midge descendant that exists as the pollinator specialist for the cliff pawpaw. The young of this species spend this vulnerable part of their lives underwater, having few predators to eat them. When the larvae emerge as adults a lunar cycle after being born, the males seek pollen from cliff pawpaw trees and the females search for host animals to suck blood from. The males get the nutrients needed for reproduction from gathering nectar from their favorite tree species, but the females will create small holes in their hosts to siphon the blood from, sometimes spreading disease in the process. The satiated males and females will go and spawn in another body of water, repeating the vicious cycle all over again. Despite the gross and parasitic cycle of these insects, the birds and mammals of the region must tolerate their presence, as they are essential pollinators for one of the major plants in the region. Another midge descendant also calls this region home. They and the necessary evil have taken advantage of the parasitic niches left behind by the lack of mosquitoes bought on the planet. The copper midge has also adapted to parasitize other animals in their adult stage. However, something that makes them unique is their larval morphs. There are two different groups of larvae that become that way due to chemicals in the local environment, which take a long time to become pupa in adults. They do best in places where earthworms don't thrive well, as the larvae are long and resemble worms in many ways besides their chitinous mouthparts. They are also coated in spikes, allowing them more protection that their fat bodies would otherwise lack. Adult copper midges will fly far from their starting points, which has led to this extreme lineage of insects to thrive almost globally during this time period. These midges and beetles and louses are not the only insects that exist here, as others have adapted to be the predators of the insect world. The Highland streamhawk is one of those organisms. Described partially in the last episode, these dragonfly descendants do best here, thriving in the long summers of this part of the world. Their young infest the waterways of the Lucindan high plateaus, being efficient predators of small fish and other insects unfortunate enough to get into the water. They spend the majority of their time in the water as their nymph stage. However, the adults are the apex predators of the skies, using their efficient wings to catch prey and dodge predators. The sacrifice running spider, a descendant of jumping spider and a close cousin with the Lucindan fur spider down south, is a uniquely adapted spider that has retained the large size that the fur spider lineage has adopted. During most of their lives, these spiders are cursorial predators. However, to cope with the lengthened winters of the region, these spiders have adapted a grim way of survival for the next generation. The species is sexually dimorphic, with males significantly smaller than females. When mating season comes in the autumn, males will fatten up and find a female. The female will eat the male after mating, his nutritious body being what she needs to sustain her eggs. She will dig a nest 5 centimeters in diameter and filled with leaves and other insulating parts. During the winter, she lays her cocoon of eggs in this safe and warm chamber, and she enters a sleep she does not wake up from. When spring arrives, the spiderlings will emerge from the cocoon and have a first meal, which may or may not be their own mother. This is a rather gruesome cycle, but allows these baby spiders better chances to survive in the wild, causing a lifestyle such as this to be evolutionarily viable. The sunbeam ants, despite their small individual sizes, are the most impressive arthropods in the whole Highlands. The descendants of black carpenter ants, these animals adapted to be less picky in property choice. Nesting in dead trees or in subterranean holes, colonies of these arthropods are usually scavengers, but will regularly work together to actively hunt other insects. However, this violent behavior is rare in between members of the same species, even when foreign colonies come into contact with each other. This is due to their yellow hairs on their back, which they are capable of ejecting when needed. These hairs can irritate other ants, encouraging colonies to stay away from one another and not engage lethally. Due to this, the sunbeam's high genetic diversity allowed them to dominate other ant species in the area into extinction, becoming the only genus of ants in the Highlands. All of these arthropods form a complicated set of chains on the food web, being predators for some species and eaten by others. However, the animals on top of this food chain are the chordates, mostly the birds and mammals in this region specifically. A bizarre group of chordates that got to these highlands is the blanket flower streamer-tailed trout. Swimming up a set of rapids on the western side of the highlands, these fish became the sole inheritors of the limited waterways in the highlands. Being the only fish in the rivers and lakes of the highlands, they are the apex predators of the waters, eating crayfish, insect nymphs, and even small birds. They are not that long, around a meter at most, but make up for that with unique colorations. Males have lengthened bits of flesh on their tails that look like streamers, and are brightly colored to attract a mate. When a male has attracted a mate, the group will spawn upriver before returning to their home waters. This can be a risky business for the males, as their brighter colors make them more easily spotted from above than a female would be. Unfortunately, just like in southern Lucindo, reptiles and amphibians have not adapted well to this region, giving way to be dominated by the birds and mammals. An exception exists for the frost toad, doing well in the highlands and the foothills alike. However, unlike southern Lucindo, the scale bows in the side of the birds, as their flight allowed them to colonize the lands before the mammals could climb upwards and adapt to the conditions of the highlands. The smallest but not the least of the mammals in the region, the arrow-toothed squirrel is an opportunistic omnivore. As this region has stands of trees separated by dozens to hundreds of feet of flat grassland in between them, these squirrels have adapted to be faster on the ground. As they have become better at running on the ground, they are better at pursuing prey. Their thick fur, slightly larger size, and sharp incisors allow them to tackle prey which are sometimes larger than they are. Their sheer determination greatly rewards the high risks when gone well, although often it can end up badly. They will typically mate with multiple partners in one breeding season, maximizing genetic diversity. Juvenile arrow-toothed squirrels often act more like their ancestors than their parents do, being more inclined to eating insects and hanging out in trees. The shaggy marmot is a small herbivore that survives the cold, arid conditions by tunneling in large social groups. Their stout bodies and big noses help retain heat, compounded further by the warm tunnels. These marmots will eat more in the autumn before entering hibernation through winter, and marmots in these large social groups are very social. Both males and females have strong, clawed arms that make them great for digging. However, they will rarely use them to attack each other. During socialization events, they will rub each other's heads and keep their bodies low to the ground. Unfortunately, given their small size, these mammals often find themselves at the bottom of the food chain. The Lucindan wandering sheep, a descendant of the bighorn sheep, have adapted to the harsh conditions of the highlands by leaving. During the early spring, these sheep return to the highlands, an easy task given their unexpectedly excellent climbing abilities, and mothers will give birth to lambs. The young will eat and grow fast over the spring and summer months, as their longer and more muscly legs will grow and be ready to run from predators that they can't fight. Males in the species have large horns that can inflict hundreds of pounds of force on impact when charging, which they are inclined to use on predators close to their young just as much as they are to use them on each other. Females in the species also have horns, but are smaller and used for self-defense against smaller predators. Late summer is the breeding season, when males will compete with each other for the right to mate. When the food becomes scarce in autumn and they have eaten their fill, they will migrate northward to warmer lands, coming down the mountains and moving through the central woodlands in herds a few dozen strong. During the warm months when the wandering sheep reside in the highlands, they come into contact with the species that looks quite similar to them, although this is only a superficial resemblance, and the Highland shaghorn are close cousins of the spotted pronghorn that live in the foothills and boreal forests of the south. The Highland shaghorn does not migrate away during the winter, opting for thicker fur and a larger body size. Their large size gives them multiple advantages, but they have given up the high speeds of their ancestors in the process. Being over 1.5 meters tall at the shoulder and weighing 700 kilograms, an adult male in his species has next nothing to fear, especially with the weaponry on their heads. Walking slowly and carefully across the dry highlands, they eat sprouts, mosses, and some grasses, but their favorite meal is the cliff pawpaw. Given the unique landscape of this region, one species has adapted to use their natural armor and take advantage of the land. The big-nosed rollum are the descendants of nine-banded armadillo that is small and omnivorous. They tend to eat grasses but will also eat fruit, insects, and fungi. Their sharper hooves allow them to be great climbers, but the key to their survival and pain both come from their armor. Their extremely thick armor and strong bones make them excellent at surviving falls from tall heights, rolling down hills and cliffs to escape predators. This strategy is very successful, as few predators can either break their armor or be willing to throw themselves down cliffs to catch prey. Rollums are social and live in a slide, or small group, composed of a few monogamous pairs. The lower gravity of the planet of Parias also lessens the damage of falling, but eventually dents, fractures, and scratches will appear in the armor, and rolling can sometimes lead to one's death. When they roll, they can often become separated, and slides will often exchange members on accident. This raccoon descendant, the false bandit bear, is a creature that often causes rollums to roll away in fear. These organisms have repurposed their arboreal habits for being better rock climbers, and their thicker forelimbs make them great at grappling prey. Another key adaptation for their predatory lifestyle is their thicker jaws and teeth, allowing them to be more carnivorous. They are smart, like their ancestors, and will employ multiple strategies to take down prey by working together. The species consists of many fission-fusion societies, with groups often being represented by one sex. Using pack tactics, an ambush from the species can be a threat to any animal in the region, even the large Highland shaghorn. These animals are also semi-fossorial, but frequently abandon their large burrows that become shelter for other small creatures. False bandit bears regularly hang out with frost toads, allowing them to reside in their burrows and clean them in exchange. However, the true king of the Highlands is not a false bear, but a true one. The golden Highland bear is a massive, long-living mammal that is capable of eating almost any resource in the region, plant or animal. With large feet, long claws, and golden yellow fur, these bears look very different from their ancestors. The golden Highland bear is the largest animal atop the flat peaks, with males weighing up to 800 kilograms. These brown bear descendants are omnivorous, eating everything from fruits to moss to fish to living and dead animals. They are capable of consuming most things, even lots of low-nutrition plants, via their long and complicated digestive tract that is capable of digesting more food types than their ancestors. With a voracious appetite, they are very territorial and tend not to tolerate the presence of other bears outside the mating season. Whilst the mammals have taken many unique niches and are doing quite well atop the Highlands of Lucindo, they are not as diverse as the great number of birds in the region. This part of the world is an excellent location for birds to nest, having few predators outside of a bold squirrel or false bandit bear, and the bounty of nutrients from the plants and insects in the region allow a safe space for hatchlings to grow. Many birds migrate here to breed and nest, one of which is the small redcap, a songbird descendant that mainly lives in the great woodlands of central Lucindo, but will come up to the highlands in the spring to build communal nests. The communal nests are defended aggressively and will often end some adults trying to defend their young. They eat insects, but will also eat fruits and seeds when given the opportunity to do so, but will travel back up north in the winter to keep warm. The mountain crake is another bird that migrates from up north in the summer months for opportunities for more food. These birds hang around water bodies in the region, building nests atop shallow water in communal groups. These vast communal nests are appetizing for other animals to consume, but many eggs and nests make it through by sheer numbers. Having thick feather coating to protect them from the elements, they do well in this climate. However, when autumn comes around, the young birds that successfully made it past the vulnerable stage of their lives will fly with their parents to northern lands to escape the harsher winter climates and to gain access to more food. They eat mostly vegetation and are quite large and stocky for flying birds, which can leave them vulnerable to predators when they are not paying attention to their environment. Yet another migratory bird that comes in from the forests up north is the blue-headed pigeon, a descendant of the resurrected species of passenger pigeon brought back by humans before leaving Parias. Despite being brought back as a resurrected species, their descendants have adapted to the conditions of the forests and highlands alike, and doing so has caused them to barely resemble their resurrected ancestors. Through most of the year, a single pair of monogamous pigeons hang together, eating berries and insects primarily. When the time is right, hundreds of blue-headed pigeons make the journey up to the steppe of the Highlands to nest. Many nests consist of 2 sets of parents who raise their small clutches in a single nest. A larger migrant that lives in the area is, of all things, a seabird. The saw-billed gull is a bird that lives along the coast for most of the year, but come to the highlands to nest in late winter to early spring. Loose groups of saw-billed gulls nest together, returning to the same site they were hatched in every year, raising chicks together. They eat fish, meat from small birds and mammals, and insects. The species breed with almost every member of their rookery, or group, so that the chicks have maximum genetic diversity and males will defend any hatchling in the group, as any of them could be potentially theirs. Members of this species can live for over 50 years, and elders with more experience will often help younger parents raise chicks of their own. This species also exhibits a surprising amount of homosexual behavior, but the ultimate reason behind this is unknown. The last of the diverse array of nesting birds in the region is a corvid descendant. The golden-tailed raven exists across most of the southern end of Lucindo, but prefers to nest in the highlands. They have not changed too much from their ancestors outside of their coloring, opting for more iridescent feathers and a beautiful array of yellow feathers that give them their name. They eat mostly meat, especially small mammals and birds, but a social murder of these golden-tailed ravens can ravage colonies of other nesting groups. A murder of golden-tailed ravens consists of 3 to 5 monogamous pairs and their young. Their intelligence has allowed them to adopt new strategies for survival, such as working together to distract other birds whilst their partner steals an egg or two. These ravens are larger and live longer than their ancestors, and their increased lifespan gives elder individuals more wisdom that they can use to help other members of the murder survive. These birds all migrate to this location to nest, many of which do in colonies, but they are not the only birds that live here. Other birds choose to stay throughout the year, not leaving when the conditions of the highlands get difficult in the dark of winter. One of these birds is the small and humble yellow-breasted chickadee. Their small size and seed-eating habits make them vulnerable against predators. Thankfully, in the spring they hide their nests in groups in a hollow tree, but when summer arrives, they often nest with the redcaps that migrate to communally nest. The yellow-breasted chickadee eats mainly insects and seeds, so they don't go into competition with the larger red birds, and they profit off of the redcaps' higher levels of aggression to larger nest raiders. This double nesting strategy ensures a large amount of chickadees make it through the summer, and their small appetites make food not too challenging to access in the winter. Another bird that relies less on the smaller tree cover is the running grouse, a spruce grouse descendant that has evolved a chicken-like body plan that gives them poorer flying skills but increased cursorial abilities. The longer and stronger legs of these birds allow them to run from ground predators into abandoned false-banded bear burrows or other ground positions. They primarily eat vegetation, and this poor source of nutrients further make these birds poor flyers. A close cousin of the running grouse is another grouse descendant who has retained more arboreal-like behaviors like their ancestors, and thus are still pretty decent flyers. The convict grouse is an amusingly named grouse descendant that has a checker-like pattern that makes their outline confusing for most predators. They feed primarily on insects and seeds, especially grass seeds. However, they opt to nest on the high cliffs, and few predators are willing to attack such a well-defended position. These birds will fly to the foothills below in the summer and fly up to the highlands in the winter. The cliff pawpaw is also a stable food supply for this veggie-eating bird, eating and dispersing seeds throughout the cold months, whilst most other birds have already left. The last and most specialized bird for sticking around in the winter is the Heisenberg vulture, a bird that has gone through radical changes to survive the arid highland conditions. They have evolved thicker skin around the head to endure the cold better. and the feathers that they still retain are thick and efficient to survive in the colder environments of the highlands. Given how flat the tops of the plateaus are, and how quickly fresh carcasses vanish in an environment like this, these condor descendants have adapted a more aggressive lifestyle. Although this bird is still able to fly, they spend more time on the ground in pursuing prey. Their cursorial running abilities and pronged beaks make them look like the ancient dromaeosaurs they descended from. Their large claws and muscular legs make great gripping weapons, which they use to pin prey before killing them with their beaks. Despite these bald, aggressive running birds' appearance, they mate for life. They form a monogamous bond and raise a single egg per clutch. Their high case selection features make them the longest living birds on South Lucindo, capable of living for over 80 Parian years. They also have unique hunting strategies, using gravity to kill prey too large for them to take down on their own. If they can push prey off of cliffs, this usually results in their death and a quick, easy meal. However, they still will scavenge when given the chance, eating prey too putrid for other animals to consume. They nest in small caves on cliff sides, with some Heisenberg vultures coming back to even visit their parents' nest. All of these animals, plants, and fungi represent the majority of the life adapted to live in the highlands of southern Lucindo. However, even this arid and frequently cold flat mountains are not the most extreme environment on the continent. Traveling past the temperate woodlands and semi-tropical swamps further north, one will inevitably counter the central Lucindan Desert, a rain shadow located on the northern side of the continent, with a depleting mountain range blocking waters coming from the east. The next episode will describe the few animals that have adapted for the harshest and hottest environment on the entire continent. This video was not completed alone. Parias has always been a collaborative project, as anyone who so wishes so can submit species to be added to the Parias canon. I wish to thank all the people who I had the pleasure of collaborating with for this project, and I wish to continue to do so as long as I can. If you wish to develop animals for the project like the people in this video have done, you could join the Discord server to do that, or just gain access to sneak peek content for future videos. If you don't want to do that, just liking and sharing these videos is more than I could ever ask for. More content of Parias will be coming soon, so you might want to keep an eye out for future videos by subscribing and turning on notifications. On top of that, I will release more non-Parias related content, but you'll see those when they come about. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you have a great day.